Have you ever found yourself doing everything you know how to do? You are reading scripture. You are praying diligently. You're even fasting at times. Yet, somehow it still feels as if God is silent. You pour out your heart. You ask all the right questions. You wait patiently, but nothing seems to shift. No answers, no clarity, just silence. If you have been there, or if you are there right now, this teaching is for you. Because what we often think is a problem of effort is actually a problem of connection. Let us look at Genesis chapter 41. Pharaoh had two disturbing dreams. He knew they meant something important, but he could not figure out what. So he summoned all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. These were the most educated men in the kingdom. They had studied symbols, omens, and dream logic. If anyone could explain a dream, it would have been them, but they could not. Scripture says, Pharaoh told them his dreams, but there was no one who could interpret them for him. Now, on the surface, that sounds like failure. But in Hebrew, there is more going on. The word used for what these wise men were trying to do is Patar. Patar is made up of three Hebrew root letters, Pe, Toph, and Resh. And each of these letters reveals something spiritually significant. 8 represents the mouth. It speaks of expression, communication, the releasing of words. It is the place where thoughts are formed into sound, where interpretations are spoken. Toph is a mark or a sign. In ancient script, Toph was drawn as a cross or a seal. It symbolizes covenant, finality, or something that points to deeper meaning, something hidden within the sign. Resh points to the head. It speaks of human leadership, intellect, self-determined authority, and rational thought. It is the mind trying to lead without submission. Put that all together, and Patar reveals a picture. Someone using the mouth to explain a sign. By relying on human understanding, it is interpretation that comes from the head, not the spirit. That is what the Egyptian wise men were doing. They were using words, they were pointing at signs. They were relying on their minds, their experience, and their perceived authority. But they were missing something vital. They were not connected to the source, and that is why their efforts failed. They tried to interpret something spiritual with natural tools. Their words sounded wise, but they lacked power because they lacked connection. Then Joseph enters the scene. After 2 years of silence, Pharaoh's cupbearer finally remembers him. Pharaoh sends for Joseph. Joseph stands before the most powerful man in the world, but he does not say, "I can tell you what it means." He says, "It is not in me." God will give Pharaoh an answer of peace. Now, here is where something powerful happens. The Hebrew word for interpret changes. It is no longer Patar, becomes Petron. At first glance, Petron might seem like just a variation of the same word. But in Hebrew, even the smallest additions carry meaning. Petron comes from the same root, Pe, Toph, Resh, but adds 2 additional letters that reveal everything about why Joseph succeeded. Those letters are Vav and Nun. Vav is the 6th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, represents a hook, a nail, or a connector. It symbolizes joining, bringing things together. In this context, it points to being joined to God. It is about relationship, unity, dependence. Nun is the 14th letter. It symbolizes life, increase, continuation, and fruitfulness. In Hebrew, Nun is often associated with a seed, something that grows, something that carries legacy and power to sustain. So what happens when you take Patar, the root of interpretation, and add connection in life? You get Petron, and that is exactly what Joseph operated in. His interpretation was not just insightful, it was connected to God. And because of that connection, it was life-giving. It brought peace, it brought clarity, and it bore fruit. Not only for Pharaoh, but for all of Egypt and the surrounding nations. That is the difference. Patar is human effort, words without power, symbols without spirit, a mouth speaking signs from the head, but disconnected from the heart of God. Petron is spiritual interpretation, words spoken from a place of humility and union with the Father. It is not rooted in intellect, but in intimacy. Let us bring this to a personal level. How many times have you prayed for direction, only to walk away more confused? How often have you studied Scripture, yet still felt unsure about what it meant for you? How many times have you said, "God, I am doing everything I know to do, but I still do not understand," Maybe the problem is not your effort. Maybe the problem is Patar. Maybe you have been using your mouth to speak about signs, but relying on your own reasoning. You have been studying with your head, but your heart has not been hooked into his. That disconnect will always produce dryness. It may sound right, but it will not bear fruit. But when you step into Petron, everything changes. When you approach scripture or prayer and say, "It is not in me," God will give the answer. You are inviting connection. You are making space for life to flow. So let me ask you, what are you trying to interpret right now? Is there a decision that feels clouded? Scripture you cannot quite understand? A calling that feels distant or unclear? Ask yourself, am I operating in Patar or am I waiting on Petron? God is not keeping answers from you. He is inviting you to go deeper. He is drawing you out of head knowledge and into heart connection, out of striving and into surrender. Say it with Joseph. Say it now. It is not in me. God will give the answer of peace. Because when your understanding is joined to Him, when your wisdom is hooked into His Spirit, what flows is not just correct, it is alive. Do not settle for Patar. Ask for Petron, and watch what happens when divine connection turns your questions into clarity and your waiting into peace.
Thank you so much for watching Remnant Revived. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and click the video for more. And we'll see you in the next one.